getting to know what matters to you, identifying when it's overstepped, and then being clear and sticking to your guns when it comes to your boundaries.
Welcome to the O for Food's Sake podcast, where we unwrap the joys and struggles of working in the food industry so you can thrive in what you do best while sustaining a rewarding and fulfilling career or business. We are your hosts, Lucy Wager, food industry consultant,
and Amy Wilkinson, food industry coach. We've worked in the food industry for the last 20 years, and we're here to share with you the benefit of our hindsight. Our podcast is for you to find new ways to cope with the daily struggles, but mostly to inspire you to work on what's not working to ultimately improve your career or business long term. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of O for Food's Sake. Today we are... This is going to be
You're
a
laughing
fun
already.
one. We are going to be talking about how to set and stick to boundaries at work, basically so that you can protect your energy and actually look after your well-being while you're doing work. And it's not just about well-being, it's about being the best version of yourself and having boundaries to do that. And the reason we're laughing at this is because we're not very good at it. And Lucy in particular.
Understatement of the year.
Because even before we hit record, we were having a conversation about something, weren't we, Lucy? And I was like, we need to talk about this on the boundaries episode. Yeah. So let's start by talking about what we mean about boundaries. And then, Lucy, I totally want to hear from you on what your thoughts are around boundaries. So I found a dictionary definition. So it's not a dictionary, it's simply psychology definition. Personal boundaries are the limits and rules individuals set to define acceptable behaviour, interaction and responsibilities in their relationships and environment. They serve to protect one's well-being, values and sense of self by delineating what one is comfortable with and one will not tolerate. But it's basically like that, what is acceptable to you and what's not acceptable to you. And like knowing where that line is.
Yes, it's like lines in the sand. And understanding what they are.
Yeah. And I just think it's such an important topic when we're talking about the food industry because, you know, basically the food industry never sleeps, does it? And it can sometimes feel impossible to have boundaries because everything is urgent. It's fast moving. You know, we're all about productivity and, you know, getting stuff out the door. And that can feel really, really hard when you're in the middle of it, particularly if I think we're going to have to do a whole episode on this, right? If you're a people pleaser like me and Lucy are.
Well, it's all intrinsically linked, isn't it?
Yeah. But in prep for this episode, I've been talking to my sister who is a therapist and obviously she's all over this stuff. And it's like she sent me loads of stuff on people pleasing. And I was like, oh no, we've got to do a whole episode on this because it's like actually realising what the impact of being too nice is. But I don't know, like, in terms of the impact it has, like I've talked loads and loads and loads of times about my burnout. Like for sure, if I had had better boundaries at work, I could have prevented the burnout that I had because I was working really long hours. I was never saying no to things. I was doing other people's jobs. I was avoiding conflict because they're the sorts of things with boundaries. So, you know, in that you're thinking about time boundaries, the boundaries around what is your job and what is somebody else's job, not taking the weight of the world on your shoulders. They're all things that kind of stick out as like they were boundaries being crossed.
And I think it's about understanding the consequences of, well, first of all, it's understanding where those boundaries are. So this is quite a complex topic for me. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, I had never even thought about boundaries until probably 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was personal therapy that like sort of highlighted boundaries, and probably you, to be fair. I mean, I'm probably not giving you credit here because I'm sure you probably mentioned it before.
Yeah, but you didn't listen to me, but you listened to your therapist. That's fine. Yeah. That's fine. That's what they're there for.
And I wonder why that is. So I wonder whether there's because I'm definitely, and my whole family, we're all about productivity, you know, pace, getting things done. So that's sort of the environment that I've been brought up in.
Yeah, I think there's so much related to that. And I've listened to a few podcasts on it as well about that whole, you know, we're brought up to be nice, helpful, you know, society is all about productivity. You know, the whole of society is all about that. So actually, we get messages all the time that basically tell us to be a nice person and to be liked, you have to have no boundaries and just do anything for anybody.
Yeah, but subconsciously.
Yeah. It's not like said like that, obviously.
Yeah, but the thing that I struggle with all of this is I'm scared of saying this because of what you're going to say. I like the fact that I don't like the fact that I don't have any boundaries. I like how that has made me, like, I like my productivity and I like working in that way. And I find the ability to be boundless really exciting. Like that excites me. And when I read and talk about the strategies to put boundaries in place, I'm just like, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. However, the reason I think this episode is important is because I think there are ways of putting boundaries in place, even if you're like me, that work for you. And I'm still working on it. And I don't even like the word boundaries. So I think there's a whole like reframing piece because the word boundary doesn't work for me because so it's finding tools that you can put in place that still maintain your productivity, because what I'm realizing is I can still be as productive as I've always been, but
possibly more productive.
Yeah, well,
if you put boundaries in.
Yeah, more productive.
And I think that's the point. That's where I wanted to get to with this episode is actually, I think we think if we work all the hours and we flog ourselves and we say yes to everything, that is what gets us success. But actually, if you really think about it, like if you're knackered and burnt out and resentful, because that's one of the things that shows up when you've somebody else has crossed a boundary of yours, then you're not doing your best work, are you?
No. And actually, because this year, so I've had I've had my busiest, best year this year. But I'm still, no, I'm not lying on a beach feeling content with the world, but I'm in a better place mentally than I was this time last year because of the things that I've put in place that have worked for me. But I still acknowledge that there is more to do, but I have been more productive than I was the previous year. I feel happier in myself. I've definitely got better boundaries in place from a personal perspective, which is really useful for my personal relationship with my husband and my kids. Although, you know, my kids still say things like, once he came into my office and Sam was putting them to bed and he said, "What's more important to you, work or your children?" I mean, talk about stabbing the heart. But other than that, I feel like I've done quite well.
Well, this is part of the thing, though, isn't it? We can't ever be perfect, but it's definitely like that work in progress. But just talk to me, Lucy, because when we talked about this episode, you were like, well, I don't know anything about that. I can't do that. Like, what has been the consequence? Where have you lacked boundaries and what's been the consequence for you?
Well, I think the fact that I didn't really appreciate boundaries at all until 3 years ago. How I've managed to get to where I've got to is because I've lacked boundaries. So there are some positives in that, but I'm also not advocating for that because my journey has been quite a roller coaster and it, you know, wouldn't be for everybody.
Yeah. And I guess that's hard work, isn't it? That doesn't necessarily, you can still work hard and have boundaries.
Yes. And this is why I'm struggling with this. And I'm certainly not someone to talk about boundaries in a way that, you know, as a guru on boundaries, because it's work in progress. But I think the downsides of it, as I've felt like I'm not winning on any front. So I felt like a failure at home, a failure at work, a failure, you know, and, you know, looking back at sort of podology days is even harder because, I mean, all I did was work, basically.
Yeah. And you said like the impact of that was I barely saw you for 7 years. You know, you just didn't have a life, did you, outside of work effectively?
No. And so it becomes all encompassing. And I think people who have been on or are on startup journeys will really understand that aspect of it because you live and breathe work. It's in your house, it's everywhere, it infiltrates every part of your life, and so that is quite traumatic, to be honest. And
it's effectively living for a long time in that kind of almost burnout state, whether it's like full on burnout or not.
I
was at book launch last week, and I was talking to a woman who she was a fellow coach, but she coaches founders or, of startups where they're on their second, or entrepreneurs where they're on their second and third venture, and she says they don't even realise that they burnt out on their first and their second, and they're still trying to act in that same way. And it's like, you can do that. And I'm just thinking about listeners now, we have the ebbs and flows of the year, when you've got stuff going on, there's only so long that you can be going above and beyond. That's why it's above and beyond, isn't it? And that's the thing.
Yeah. And I think the thing for me is, especially now I've sort of reached, I'm 42 now, and I've said this to a few people recently, I've realised that through my 20s, I was like, work, this is what I'm going to do, and I'll worry about that when I get to my 40s and everything will be fine by then. And then you get to your 30s and you're thinking, God, I better I feel like, I've met someone and want to get married and, have kids. And so then you start doing that. And then I've got to this stage in my life now where I'm like, when am I going to be happy? And it's not that I haven't been happy through that time, but I've always been looking forward, thinking, when I get there, when I get to that point, and I get to that point. And I've now realised I need to enjoy the now. So I need whatever I'm doing, I need to continue doing what I'm doing and being productive. And I love what I do. And I want to continue to love what I do, but I want to love what I'm doing outside of that just as much and embrace that just as much. And I've realised that, I am, and I sort of joke about being a workaholic, but I do love working. Yeah. But it can't be to the detriment of everything else.
Yeah.
And I also had an interesting conversation with a client of mine who's a startup. And one of the things that I love doing now when I work with startups is I love being the person that can give them the permission to look after themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, when you're in a startup, you have this and I'm not saying you don't have this in a proper job environment, because you do. So when you've got proper that weight,
corporate environment,
when you've got that weight of work or a startup or whatever it is on your shoulders, and you feel like it's all on you, you feel like giving yourself some time and putting boundaries in place that would protect you is a sin. Yeah. Because you feel like you have to give it everything. Because if you then feel like you haven't given it everything, then you're going to fail.
Yeah.
And I really, really hope that I help to make my clients realize that that isn't true. And that if they're not looking after themselves and giving themselves what they need, they're not going to be able to deliver what they need to deliver in their business.
Yeah.
And I definitely think that was me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is that fear, isn't it? It's the fear of failing. It's the fear of that pressure to, whether it is in a startup environment or if it's your own career or whatever.
Yeah, because you felt the same.
It
was the same reasons that you, carried on, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's the same
feeling.
Yeah,
and it's because I wanted and the boundaries thing for me with the burnout was almost, it wasn't even just about the long hours. Like, me and you are hard workers and we are able to work hard and long hours. It's just part of our DNA. It was more about that. What happens when you're constantly letting people overstep your boundaries or not setting the boundaries yourself properly is you start to lose that sense of self. Because you're molding yourself and you're changing yourself, or you're accepting behavior from others that isn't acceptable. And that, I think, was a bigger part of what led to my burnout, rather than just the physical hours that I was doing.
Really good point, because I think one of the ways so I don't like the word boundaries, but the way I think about it is I want there to be joy in my life. So what do I need to do to make sure that I have joy in my life?
Yeah.
So there's things that I need to address and put some boundaries in place. So I think about it and I think, what is this doing for me personally or work-wise? Where does this fit in what I want to achieve from a work perspective or a personal perspective? Is it bringing me joy? And that can be, it's a new client, and the joy that's going to come out of it is that I'm going to be able to go on holiday in October, So I try and see everything like that. And if there's something...
I think it's about being more intentional, isn't it? That's the thing. I think we've spent the last 20 years of our careers kind of letting things happen to us and not really thinking it through as much as what is in it for me? Is this going to give me That was one of the things that my sister was saying. Like, we always talk about energy hoovers and energy drains and energy radiators. Is this going to give me more energy, or is it going to drain the life out of me? Because I think that's one of the things for me now, is when somebody's coming to me with a piece of work, I could say yes to everything. And early on in my business, I'd said yes to more than I would say to now. Whereas now I'm like, oh my goodness, that's going to, like, that is way too close to the periphery. Like, it's not really my remit. It's going to drain me of all my energy. I'm going to be really worried about it. Do you know what? I'm just going to stick to what I'm really good at. And that's part of that boundary for me.
It is. But it's important to say, when you work for yourself, when you first, we're sort of 4 or 5 years into our businesses, when you first start, you don't know, you never know where the next work's going to come from. I know. So you always have that insecurity feeling. But I think it's important to say, if you are in that phase of your journey within a new business, it's okay to have that feeling of, I'm feeling stretched. But as long as you've got that kind of longer term plan that this is where I want to get to, so you're always doing it. Because when you were saying that, it just made me think that last year, me and Sam, my husband, were both really, really busy with work and feeling really stretched and pretty miserable, to be honest. And I remember saying to him, like, why are we doing this? Why are we working so hard and not getting what we want out of it? When is this going to end? Why are we doing this? And I've only just remembered that because we're both still working as hard, if not harder, than we were last year, but we're in a much better place individually, just happier, supporting each other with what we're doing. And that's because of boundaries. And I don't even really know what those boundaries are.
Is it about that you've got a better balance? What do you feel has changed?
I think the structure of the work that I've been doing this year is different. And therefore, inevitably, the boundaries are different.
Yeah.
I probably am enjoying the work more.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick breather here to hear from our fantastic sponsors. They help keep the podcast going, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Ensuring food safety and quality is crucial. That's why businesses trust Microsearch Laboratories, part of the IFP Labs Group. UCAS-accredited Microsearch offers microbiological, nutritional and allergen testing for food, drink and water, delivering fast results and expert support. With over 30 years of experience, trusted by leading manufacturers and retailers, and a commitment to sustainability, Microsearch is your partner in product safety. Visit micro-search.co.uk to learn more.
Fearless Women Empowered to Rise is a program designed to help women just like you step into their power, grow their confidence, and take the next step in their personal and professional lives. Through practical tools, shared experiences, and a supportive space, you'll build the skills and mindset you need to rise on your terms. If you're ready to feel empowered and take action, click the link in the show notes to join us. And we're back. Thanks for sticking with us. Let's dive right back in. There's definitely been conversations that we've had where you've got much clearer, haven't you, on like the same as me, like what your zone of genius is, and not just saying, like, it is that sense of self, like I'm doing what I'm good at.
It is, definitely, because I know we're going to talk about mentoring in another episode, but I've been through, I'm still being mentored, and that has really helped me understand, who I am and in a work sense, and what I want to be working on and who I want to be working with. And that's really helped. And I think that is a boundary. That is about boundaries for me, because it's...
Well, it is when you're setting boundaries, because I've conscious we want to give tips and like advice on how to, for people listening, how to do it. The identification of what matters to you is part of that. It's like, so actually having a stronger sense of self, and I know I've talked about values and stuff like that before, like what really matters to you, actually spending some time thinking about that so that you can identify what those boundaries are. And also another way of doing it is almost reflecting back on those moments where you have felt really resentful. It's almost like the points where you've got really pissed off show you where a boundary was. So when you've really resented something that somebody said, or you might feel it in your body, when you just feel a bit or whatever, like those are signals. And we talk about it when we do training, we're talking about emotions. They're signals that tell you a boundary's been crossed.
Yeah. I've got a really good example, which is a bit of a funny one. And I think this is probably why I've struggled with boundaries, because so I would say yes to absolutely everything. including social events, work events, absolutely everything.
I know.
And like resent everything. I have realised that I'm naturally quite an introverted sort of person.
Yes.
And I like being at home with Sam. Like, that's my ideal night. Me and Sam watching telly with a cup of tea, right? And I have faced the fact to be okay with that.
Yeah.
And so I also really like working. So what I realised is I need to say no to social events.
Yeah.
Which seems counterintuitive. And I'm also almost like embarrassed to say it out loud. But that's what I want to do. I want to spend my time working or spending it with Sam and the kids and, you know, my immediate family. I don't really like going out at night. And so I've realised that that's a boundary that I need to put in place. And that's released a lot of that. Resentment's probably the wrong word because I still do see friends, but it's much more on my terms and not at night.
I totally get it. And that was part of what I did when I rebuilt myself from burnout, was actually identifying my energy drains and the energy hoovers and the things that I just say no to things now that I don't want to do. Like not always, sometimes, and it's harder I find with family because, you know, there's all that shiz going on in your mind about it. But with friends and stuff, I've got a much tighter group of friends because I don't feel the need to do all of that stuff. And I think I was doing it for the wrong reasons. And that is all part of kind of understanding where it is that you need to set those boundaries and getting to know yourself better.
And being okay with it, not worrying that, thinking that it's not what everybody else would do. Because I think I thought, well, I should be enjoying that. I should be sacrificing work to do that social.
Yeah. And that's the whole societal pressure thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like we see everybody on Instagram doing it, so we've got to do it ourselves. But actually, there's some real value in going, do you know what? That isn't for me and I don't want to do that. So think if you're listening, like, you know, think about those things where you might be feeling like a little bit overwhelmed, or like the things that you book in and then you're like, oh God, you know, it comes to the day, you're like, oh God, I shouldn't have done that. Like, what is the boundary that is being crossed there? Sometimes, you know, sometimes we have to push ourselves out of our comfort zone. But if you're consistently doing it, ask yourself why are you doing that? And I also think there's boundaries and stuff at home as well. Like poor Barry, I always talk about him and the flipping washing machine, don't I? When dishwasher when we're doing training. But, you know, that's an example of, like, this was like in lockdown where I was finding myself, like, he was still going out to work and I was at home, you know, with a toddler, and I was getting so frustrated by the dishwasher not being emptied. And we just, you know, we've set that boundary like 4 years ago now, and he does the dishwasher every day. And it sounds so ridiculous, but actually
it's not.
It's those things that are the things that piss you off.
Yeah, it's the simple things, isn't it, that can really make a big difference.
But I think we worry about setting those boundaries sometimes because we're worried about confrontation and how the other person's going to take it. So actually, it's about being really calm and clear about how you communicate that with that other person. So when I did ask Barry to start emptying the dishwasher more regularly, I didn't go, oh, for God's sake, you never done the dishwasher. I mean, there have been times when that has happened. But actually, we sat down and it was like, you know, when I'm doing all of this and I'm having to do this, it makes me feel X, and I'm wondering if you could just do Y for me. You know, like, you take the emotion and the anger out of it and it's just like, no, this is what I need. And the thing is, I think a really important thing when it comes to boundaries is to realise that it is your boundary and it is for you to maintain that boundary. So you cannot affect what that other person does. They may still overstep that boundary. Yeah. It is your job to keep the boundary.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Because, you know, like, I'm just thinking about an old boss that I had who used to text. I think I've talked about it before. Used to text me. I started putting my phone on do not disturb, like my work phone, and then they started Facebook messaging me because they knew I was putting my phone in the other room. It's just like, oh my God, this is so unacceptable. And you know, I'd had those conversations. It didn't make any. So I just started ignoring the messages because it's my boundary to hold, right? She kept pushing and pushing and pushing it, but it's down to, like, if I'm going to reply, then I am letting her through that boundary. So don't reply.
Yeah. And that's where you have to really understand why that boundary's there.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's very easy for you to break it.
Yeah.
because you don't want to let that person down. But if you can see that, that's an extreme example, because that's completely, even I think that's unacceptable behavior. But I had a very similar conversation with someone yesterday, and I said exactly that to her, that it's the other person's, that there's nothing, you can't impact what they do. You can only impact how you feel about it and how you respond to it.
Yeah. And keep and hold yourself accountable for keeping that boundary yourself. Another one that I'm guilty of is getting, like you've got something that you really need to get done and you get distracted by like a million different things. And the people pleaser in me is, like say if an invoice comes in and, I want to pay it straight away, or like stupid little jobs can take up a load of part of my day. But actually the priority for me today is I've got to get this done. So I'm getting much better at time blocking.
Yes, I was going to say.
Oh, go on. Yes, because, oh my God, listeners, 4 years ago, we did an episode, I think, about time blocking. And Lucy was like, no, I'm never going to do that. And then last week when I said about this, she was like, oh, I'm going to talk about how I'm time blocking. I'm like, oh, we're finally there.
I know.
So tell people about time blocking.
So, who even am I? I'm going to start with. I've always really resisted time blocking. I've never seen how it can possibly work for me. But I think it's a bit like the boundaries thing. And I don't like hard structure. But what I do like is a bit of structure that I can move with.
Yeah.
So now I've identified that I can see time blocking as that. And that what I've realized is if something's not in my diary, I don't do it, or it gets like demoted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which has caused me some issues. So I think I've mentioned on podcasts before, I've been working with a fantastic finance coach who has like changed my life this year. Big up Claire at Mint Coaching. Highly recommend. And it was actually her. She also does productivity. So we've moved on to productivity. And she said, how do you feel about time blocking? I was like, hate it. And she's like, well, let's talk about this. What, how could we do it? So she sort of sowed this seed and I started to give it a go and I'm loving it. And I'm moving.
I'm trying not to sit here and go, she never listens to me, but she listens to the people she pays.
It's taken me a long time to get there. And Amy has talked to me about time blocking before. It's just, I've never been in a position. I think, it's been a journey of doing lots of different things. And the thing is, I like being very flexible with my time. It's one of the benefits of working with me for my clients. And I never want that to change. But I've realized that it doesn't have to change. And I can still have these, flexible boundaries in my diary.
Exactly. Well, and this is the thing, isn't it? A boundary isn't necessarily about being an arse and being like, well, I can only do it with it between these and whatever. It's actually just about being clear on what isn't acceptable.
I think for me, it's about being more aware of where I'm spending my time and what I'm doing. And, I think it's really helping with my client relationships as well. It's definitely really helping me. And I do it because I like visuals. My diary is very colour coordinated, so I can very quickly sort of get an idea of where I am and what I'm doing, and I move things around. I'm not doing time blocking in a way that I had in my head, but it's a tool that I'm now using, which is really helping me, and especially it's helping me from a personal perspective more so than anything, because it's helping me sort of foresee much more into the future, which I'm loving because I've got my calendar in my head anyway, and now I've got like my colour blocking in as well. And especially it's at this time of year when I'm conscious that the kids are going to break up and I want to do some Christmassy things with them. So I'm just kind of putting things in my diary, which I've never done. And then thinking, well, how am I going to work that around that? And, it's just,
It's just about getting clearer, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think another thing is that I hear from clients all the time is that whole pressure that you have. Like, so say if you've got 2 or 3 days out of the office because you're going to a different site or you're going to a retailer and whatever, and you don't have, like the emails pile up, don't they? And actually, like everybody wants a piece of you and you've got to be realistic about how much time you've got to do things. Is actually a lot of auto replies people just put on like, I'm out of the office, I'm back tomorrow. Actually, I'm out of the office. like word it how it feels comfortable for you, but it's going to take me a few days to get back to you. You know, like actually being really clear on, you know, I'm not here at your beck and call. That's what an out of office is for.
I'm definitely not there yet. These are the ones that I'm just like, I don't, you know, that just doesn't sit, but I understand why it would work for other people.
Yeah. And I think you have to be prepared when you're setting boundaries that you are going to get pushback. People are going to push back on them. But actually,
are they?
Well, some people, this is the thing. I think a lot of the time we think, oh my goodness, like how are they going to react if I say that? And then you actually say it and they're like, yeah, no, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah,
like I hear that all the time where people are like, you know, I just assumed I had to get it done for tomorrow. But then when I said I couldn't get it done till next week, they said, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. So I think if we're talking to people like you and I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
So, and I want to say that because I think I've always seen that. That's been my barrier.
Yeah.
So don't assume there will be pushback.
No, don't assume. But I think there are people that might, like I'm thinking, say you're in an MPD team, it's really busy, you say no to something, somebody pushes back. Like that happens, doesn't it? Things get escalated. You end up having to do it anyway. But actually, you know, staying firm to your boundaries is important in that situation. And the whole saying no thing. Did we do an episode on saying no?
Yeah, we've done episodes on saying no and on people pleasing. But with all these things, you know, things move on and we've probably got more.
Yeah, I'm thinking we could do a whole nother episode on saying no. Because, you know, actually thinking about how you defer, you know, how you're polite in the way that you do that, you know,
because we did that book. Sorry.
Yeah. I can't remember what it was called.
We did a book review. We'll put it in the show notes. Because it's
professional as ever, you know, we've got all of this stuff, you know, we know what we're talking about.
It's probably 2 years ago, to be fair.
Yeah, probably more. We're coming up to 4 years of the podcast, Lucy.
I know.
It's like, celebrate.
Thank you for being here with us, listeners.
Yeah.
Rate and review.
So sticking to your boundaries, really, really important. I think we've gone all over the place in this conversation, but I just want to pull it back together just to give listeners a bit of clarity. Like boundaries are about the things that are important to you. So actually the start of it is identifying what is important to you and what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. What are your non-negotiables and where's that line that you don't want other people to cross or yourself to cross, because the boundaries with ourselves are as important as boundaries with other people. Then start to identify, how do you know it's been crossed? What goes on for you? So I had one last night. I was putting Holly to bed and it's been a tough couple of weeks where she's just wanted mummy and not wanted daddy. And we're recording this before Christmas. So it's just like all the lead up to Christmas and all of that stuff. And she wanted to do a book in bed that was not a reading book. And I was just like, and obviously I didn't take it out on her, but I was messaging Barry like going, I'm done. I'm just done. And he, like, after she was asleep and stuff, he's good, you know, can you imagine what it's like living with me? But he was very good. And he was like, what's going on? And all of this. And I was just like, I just feel like I'm doing everything. You know, I'm feeling resentful, this, that, and the other. Like a boundary had been crossed. And I mean, it's, you know, it was Christmas wrapping time. So he got me a Bailey's. Like,
I can't believe you're doing Christmas wrapping. Like everybody I speak to is making me feel so awful about Christmas.
I'll just delegate it. But anyway, my point being, my trick, like I didn't know where it came from. He said to me, where did that come from? But it was a boundary that had been crossed. I was doing too much. I was feeling like there was too much being done, you know, and actually I said something possibly in a passive aggressive way by just going, I'm done.
But you had a good conversation afterwards.
But then we had a good conversation about it. Yeah. So I think there's this has
been like a marriage counselling's episode as well.
Yeah. But, you know, then he's stepping up a little bit more on certain things as well. So it's about getting to know what matters to you, identifying when it's overstepped, and then being clear and sticking to your guns when it comes to your boundaries. But it's not easy. I reckon there'll be another episode in 6 months' time.
We should do check-ins.
Yeah. Maybe we should get my sister on and she can tell us how to do it properly.
I can't do that episode because I'll just be going, no.
Anyway, so I hope you found that useful. And not just us like going all over the place talking about how terrible we are at boundaries, but actually some proper takeaways from it for you.
And baby steps are okay. Progress.
Yeah. And remembering that boundaries are not about you being difficult. It's about protecting your energy. So if you're saying yes to something, what are you saying no to for yourself?
Yeah.
And vice versa.
How will it impact you? Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Okay, and we will see you next time.
See you next time. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it, rate and review us. It really helps us reach more food industry pros like you.
For more resources, head over to our website, overfoodsake.co.uk, and join our mailing list to stay in touch.
And if you'd like to connect with us, come say hello on LinkedIn. We're both there, Lucy Wager and Amy Wilkinson.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.